Get this woman out of here, now! The manager's voice sliced through the elegant restaurant like a blade. A black woman stood frozen, her expression unreadable, as the security guard grabbed her arm, right inside a place she secretly owned. No one knew who she really was. Not the manager, not the hostess, not the staff who laughed behind her back. But with one quiet phone call, everything was about to change. Careers would end, secrets would explode, and the restaurant, it would never be the same again. You think you've seen karma before? Think again, because this one's going nuclear. The Sapphire Table was a 5-star dining oasis nestled in the heart of Manhattan, known for its crystal chandeliers, whisper-quiet service, and a wine list longer than most people's resumes. But none of that mattered the moment Camille Johnson stepped inside. Dressed in worn jeans, a plain navy hoodie, and scuffed sneakers, she looked more like someone searching for leftovers than the new owner of the restaurant. She didn't carry a purse worth thousands or speak with the entitled tone the staff was used to. She simply walked in, calm, steady, unnoticed. At the front, Emily Hayes sat behind the marble hostess stand, tapping at her iPad with perfectly manicured nails. She glanced up just long enough to give Camille a once-over, then immediately dropped her eyes again. "Excuse me," Camille said, her voice soft but clear. Emily didn't answer. Instead, she let out a breath through her nose and asked without looking up, "Are you here for a delivery?" Camille paused. "No, I'd like a table." That got Emily's attention. She looked Camille up and down like she was roadkill. "Reservations only," she said sharply. "You can't just walk in here." "I own," Camille began, but before she could finish, a loud voice cut through the air. "What's going on here?" Derek Burns, the floor manager, appeared with the exaggerated swagger of someone used to being obeyed without question. His suit was sharp, but his smile was razor thin. Emily nodded toward Camille. "She says she wants a table." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, I don't know where you think you are, but this isn't the kind of place you can just stroll into off the street." "I understand," Camille said calmly, her voice still quiet. "You need to leave. Now." A few nearby diners paused mid-bite to glance over. The tension in the room spiked. Camille didn't move. She simply met Derek's stare with a cool, unreadable gaze. That's when he snapped his fingers at the nearby security guard. "Tom, escort this woman out. Now." Tom Rivera, a thick-armed man with a buzz cut and zero nuance, stepped forward. "Let's go," he growled, reaching for Camille's arm. She didn't resist, but she also didn't flinch. As his hand closed around her wrist, she looked at him with an expression that should have frozen blood. "I'll walk," she said simply. The diners watched in awkward silence as Camille was led out like a criminal, her head held high. No shouting, no pleading, just one final glance over her shoulder, an icy look that said more than words ever could. They had no idea who they'd just thrown out. Camille Johnson sat in the driver's seat of her discreet black Tesla, parked across the street from the very restaurant that had just publicly humiliated her. The engine was off. Her hands rested on the wheel, motionless, but her mind was a storm. She exhaled slowly, then picked up her phone and tapped a contact marked simply, Maya. The line clicked almost immediately. "Camille, are you out?" Maya's voice was tight, anxious. "Yes," Camille said calmly. "They failed, spectacularly." There was a pause on the line. Then Maya asked, "That bad?" "Worse than I expected," Camille said. "The manager called security, had me physically removed." Maya let out a quiet curse. "I wasn't even allowed to speak a full sentence," Camille continued. "No ID check, no policy explanation, just profiling, pure and simple." "Do we proceed?" Maya asked. Camille didn't answer immediately. She stared out the windshield at the polished facade of the Sapphire Table, watching the same hostess who had ignored her now smiling brightly at a well-dressed white couple. She clicked her tongue once, low. "Initiate Protocol 19. "Copy that. Full protocol?" "Yes." Camille said. "Top to bottom. I want documentation on all employees, financial practices, service patterns. No one knows we're behind it yet." Maya's voice lowered. "You want me to contact the board liaison too?" Camille's eyes narrowed. "Not yet. I want to give them just enough rope to hang themselves first." As Maya confirmed and ended the call, Camille leaned back against the headrest, letting the silence fill the space. The coldness in her stare didn't come from anger. It came from calculation. Because Camille Johnson wasn't just a CEO, that was only the tip of the iceberg. 3 years ago, she had signed a non-disclosure agreement with a European oversight agency specializing in global equity audits, mystery inspections targeting elite industries with histories of systemic discrimination. Camille had agreed to become a silent operative, embedding herself into the very luxury spaces that claimed diversity, only to reveal how fragile those claims truly were. This wasn't just personal revenge, it was professional exposure. Camille wasn't just testing her own restaurant. She was testing the hospitality industry itself. And the first test had failed with flying colors. She scrolled through her encrypted app, uploading audio from her hidden lapel mic. Then she tagged each staff member by face, using facial recognition from the restaurant's security footage, which, of course, she had full access to. One call had started the unraveling, but it wouldn't be the last. 23 minutes after Camille was escorted out, another woman walked through the same glass doors of the sapphire table. She was the image of professional polish, tapered navy pantsuit, subtle diamond studs, heels that clicked confidently on the marble floor. Her natural curls were pinned back, and she carried a sleek leather portfolio. Her name was Talia Monroe. From her spot in the Tesla, Camille leaned forward slightly. Her camera was already rolling. Inside, Emily looked up from her podium. The second she saw Talia, her face shifted from blank to brittle. That same condescending smile returned. "Can I help you?" Emily asked, her tone saccharine and sharp. "Yes," Talia replied, calm but firm. "I'm here for a table, reservation under Monroe." Emily frowned, tapping on her screen, lips pursed. I don't see anything under that name." "Are you sure you booked through our system?" "I am." Talia didn't blink. Emily made a show of double-checking. "Well, unfortunately, we're fully booked. You might try somewhere, a bit more accessible." From the car, Camille's jaw tightened. She zoomed in slightly, capturing every movement. Talia glanced around the restaurant. "That table by the window, it's empty." "That's reserved," Emily snapped, her mask slipping. "For regulars." "Interesting," Talia murmured. "Because your website just showed that table is open when I stepped in." Emily's smile hardened. "I think it's best you find another place to dine." A few heads turned. The tension crackled, just as it had earlier. Camille whispered to herself, "They're doing it again." Suddenly, Derek appeared from the side hallway. "Problem?" he asked, eyes narrowing at Talia. "I had a reservation. Your hostess says otherwise." Derek didn't even pretend to care. "We don't need to explain ourselves. You're free to leave." Talia gave a tight smile. "Not yet." "Excuse me?" Derek's voice rose. "Actually," Talia said, reaching into her blazer, "I think you'll want to see this." She produced a small leather badge case and flipped it open. Camille sat upright in the Tesla. The badge gleamed under the chandelier light. "Detective Talia Monroe, Civil Rights Division," she said quietly, her voice cutting clean through the noise. "I'm conducting an ongoing investigation into repeated discriminatory practices in high-end establishments throughout Manhattan." Derek blinked. Emily froze. "And you," Talia continued, turning slightly toward Emily, "just became Exhibit B." Camille couldn't help but smile. An hour later, the doors of the sapphire table opened once more, this time with forceful elegance. Camille Johnson stepped inside, but she was no longer the woman in sneakers and a hoodie. Now, she wore a midnight black pantsuit tailored within an inch of perfection, paired with red-bottom stilettos and a platinum pin bearing the discreet logo of Sapphire Holdings. Her hair was pulled into a sleek chignon, and her expression was unreadable. The same diners who had seen her removed earlier blinked in stunned recognition. Was that? Emily looked up and froze mid-sentence. Her mouth dropped slightly. She stood straighter, visibly flustered. "Good evening, ma'am. May I help?" But Camille didn't acknowledge her. She walked past the hostess stand without pause. From a nearby table, Derek noticed the disturbance. He stormed over, irritation already flaring. "Excuse me, you can't just—" He stopped. His eyes scanned Camille's outfit, her jewelry, her posture. Something about her was familiar. Still, he pressed forward, posture aggressive. "Ma'am, we have a strict reservation policy. If you don't have is there a problem?" A new voice cut in. It was smooth, warm, but with an edge of urgency. Victor Malone, district manager of Sapphire Holdings, impeccably dressed, but with sweat beading slightly along his hairline. He approached with arms half extended, like trying to bridge a chasm before it opened. "Ms. Johnson," he said with forced cheer, "we weren't expecting you today." Camille turned her gaze toward him, finally speaking. "Neither was your staff, clearly." Victor's smile faltered. Derek blinked. "Ms. Johnson?" Camille didn't turn to him. "I own this restaurant," she said simply, eyes still locked on Victor. "Among others." Emily's breath caught. Victor let out a nervous chuckle. "Of course. The team didn't recognize you out of context, I'm sure." "Out of context," Camille repeated, tilting her head. "An interesting way to describe being thrown out of my own business." Victor's eyes darted briefly toward Derek, then back. "We'll address that immediately, privately." Camille said nothing, but her silence was louder than any reprimand. She watched Victor closely. His words were smooth, but his posture tense, controlled. Something didn't sit right. Derek stepped back, pale now. I didn't realize." "No," Camille said, her voice cool. "You didn't." Victor gestured toward the private lounge. "Shall we sit and talk?" Camille glanced once more at Emily, then at Derek, then finally back at Victor. She nodded. "Yes, let's talk." But as she followed him toward the back, her eyes stayed sharp. Victor Malone had greeted her like an ally, but Camille had spent her life reading power, and what she saw in his eyes wasn't confidence. It was fear. The private lounge was dimly lit, with velvet chairs and a view of the Manhattan skyline that most people would pay a fortune to see. Camille didn't sit. She remained standing, her arms crossed, posture unshakable. Victor Malone cleared his throat and gestured to a chair. "Please, Ms. Johnson, have a seat. Let's discuss this like professionals." Camille's voice was soft but carried steel. "Victor, I'm invoking Clause 14B." Victor froze. His outstretched hand dropped slowly to his side. I beg your pardon?" "You heard me," Camille said. "Clause 14B of the Sapphire Group Charter, effective immediately." His face drained of color. That's meant for catastrophic breaches," he said, voice suddenly hushed. "And this," she replied, "qualifies." Without another word, Camille pulled out her phone and dialed a secure number. 3 rings. "Verification?" asked a voice on the other end. "Camille Johnson, Protocol 14 Bravo, immediate audit authorization." There was a pause. Then, "Confirmed. ETA, 2 minutes." She ended the call and looked up at Victor. "You've got 3 minutes to brace yourself," she said. Outside the lounge, Derek was pacing, still visibly shaken. Emily hovered near the podium, whispering frantically to a busboy. The staff felt it, the tension, the shift in the air. Exactly 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, the glass doors to the sapphire table swung open once again. 4 individuals entered, 2 women, 2 men, all dressed in charcoal gray suits with discreet Sapphire Holdings insignias. They carried tablets, file cases, and an air of terrifying purpose. Camille stepped out of the lounge to greet them. "Ms. Johnson," said the lead auditor, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena Cruz, "we've received your directive. Full operational audit," Camille instructed. "Start with staffing records, incident logs, and security footage from today." Victor approached, voice laced with tension. "Camille, this is drastic. We can sort this internally." "This is internal," she cut in. "Welcome to the consequences, Victor." Auditors fanned out like a tactical team. Elena walked straight to Emily, who turned pale as paper. "Name?" "Emily. Hayes." Elena tapped her tablet. "You're the one who turned away a reservation that existed in the system." Emily stammered. I didn't see." "Security footage will confirm," Elena said flatly. Derek took a step back as another auditor approached him. "You verbally and physically removed a woman from this restaurant today without cause, correct?" "I didn't know who she was," Derek snapped. "That's not going to help you." Within moments, clipboards were out, files were pulled, and interviews began, right there on the floor. Diners watched in stunned silence as the elegant facade of the sapphire table began to unravel. Camille watched it all, unmoved. One phone call, and the entire structure began to collapse. While the auditors questioned staff and scanned records, one of them, Marcus Leong, a veteran in corporate fraud detection, stood silently near the host stand, flipping through the laminated menus on display. His brow furrowed. He picked up 2 menus, one in English, another in French. He placed them side by side on a nearby table and began running his finger line by line. "Camille!" he called without raising his voice. She turned immediately. He pointed to the French menu. "Imported seafood risotto, listed at €65. English version says $45. Same item, same ingredients. No notation of market pricing or currency fluctuation." Victor's face went rigid. Camille's eyes narrowed. "Continue." Marcus pulled out 2 more copies, Japanese and Mandarin versions. "Same pattern. Prices are inflated by 20% to 40% on menus presented to non-English speaking tourists. The QR code menus accessed by IP geolocation automatically show inflated pricing, routed through a shadow POS system." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." "Keep going," Camille said flatly. Marcus tapped on his tablet. "This system was designed to bypass central inventory tracking. Tips rerouted, receipts rewritten, financials obscured. Someone built this on purpose." Victor stepped forward, voice strained. "That can't be correct. That system was implemented before I took over." "Spare me," Camille cut in, not looking at him. "I know exactly when it started." She turned to Marcus. "Would you like to know how I know?" Marcus blinked. "How?" Camille's tone dropped an octave. "Because I was one of the victims." The entire room stilled. 4 years ago," she continued, "at the Paris location. I dined alone. Was overcharged, dismissed when I questioned it. When I requested a copy of the menu in French, the server laughed. Said, 'Our tourists don't need that.'" Victor looked like he'd swallowed nails. "I never forgot that night," Camille said. "I traced the transactions. I found the same software signature. Then I waited until I had full control." Her voice remained calm, but it carried fury. "I baited this location by leaking a dummy travel agency promotion to international markets," she explained. "It flooded your system with non-native reservations." She walked over to Marcus and held up her phone. "Those guests? Monitored, tracked, double-billed, upsold with phantom fees." She turned to Victor. "You let it happen," she said. Victor opened his mouth. "Camille." "No," she said. "You looked the other way because profits rose." Marcus added quietly, "We're pulling all sales logs from the last 6 months. This may qualify as international financial fraud." Camille didn't flinch. "Good. I want criminal liability where it applies." Victor stepped back, his hands trembling slightly. The restaurant wasn't just under investigation. It was a crime scene. The air inside the sapphire table had thickened, tension hanging like smoke. Auditors moved with precision, Staff whispered nervously, and Victor Malone stood near the bar, visibly unraveling. Camille stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished marble like a countdown. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. From the inner pocket of her blazer, she pulled out a matte black business card and placed it gently on the host stand, right beside the guest log. The silence was instant. The card read, Camille Johnson, Chief Executive Officer, Sapphire Holdings, Global. Emily took a step back, her lips parting. "Oh my God!" Tom, the security guard who had dragged Camille out earlier, paled. His hand twitched toward his radio, unsure whether to use it or run. Camille said nothing. She simply looked around the room, at the customers, the staff, the stunned auditors, then let her gaze fall back on Derek. He stood frozen for a moment, blinking rapidly. Then, like a man clinging to the edge of a cliff, he forced a dry laugh. This is a prank, right? Anyone can print a card. You're not her." Camille tilted her head, slowly. "You think I'd orchestrate all this? For a prank?" she asked, her pen silk laced with razors. Derek's voice cracked. "This doesn't make sense. You were dressed like someone who didn't deserve respect," she finished for him. The room sucked in a collective breath. Camille stepped closer, her voice still level. "You assumed worth based on appearance, not service, not policy, not even manners. You saw what you wanted to see, a woman who didn't belong." She turned slightly, letting her gaze scan the staff. "Every decision made here today," she continued, "was based not on logic, but bias. You didn't fail a customer, you failed your core values." Emily let out a choked sound. Her hands trembled. I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson. I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to know," Camille said. "That was the point." Tom took a step forward. "Ma'am, I didn't mean—" She held up a single finger. He stopped cold. Derek's face was red now. "Look, I didn't mean anything personal. I was following standard guest management protocol." "Protocol doesn't include humiliation," Camille said sharply. Just then, Elena Cruz, the lead auditor, stepped up beside Camille. "Ms. Johnson, internal verification is complete. Your ownership status, executive authority, and chain of command clearance have all been confirmed. Everyone here has been notified." Camille nodded. The truth wasn't just spoken. It was now official, recorded, and distributed. And in that moment, as eyes darted back and forth across the room, it became painfully clear. The woman they tossed out owned everything. The room still buzzed from the fallout of Camille's reveal. Auditors circled like hawks, and the staff stood like dominoes waiting to fall. But in the far corner of the dining room, a man quietly folded his linen napkin and placed it beside an untouched glass of wine. He stood. He wasn't flashy. Gray three-piece suit, silver cufflinks, a modest watch. But something about him drew every eye. Authority radiated from him, not in noise, but in presence. A few diners recognized the face. Most didn't, but Camille did. "Richard," she said softly, her expression shifting for the first time. Richard Quinn nodded once. "Camille." Derek squinted. "Who?" Victor, however, turned pale. His lips parted, and a cold sweat dotted his forehead. Richard took a slow step forward. "I've seen enough," he said, his voice like iron wrapped in silk. Elena Cruz straightened immediately, as did the rest of the audit team. Camille remained composed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. This wasn't planned. "You were here the whole time," she said, almost to herself. Richard offered a thin smile. "An unannounced inspection. The board wanted eyes on the ground, and I volunteered. Call it curiosity." He turned toward Victor. "What I found was systemic negligence, cultural rot, and moral bankruptcy, served with filet mignon." Victor stammered. "Mr. Quinn, I had no idea." "That's the problem," Richard cut in. "You didn't know, you didn't care, and now you don't belong." Camille blinked. So this was more than observation? Richard looked back at her, his tone softening. We're reevaluating strategic partnerships. I needed to know whether your leadership still upheld the standards we invested in. Camille's brow furrowed. And? Richard met her gaze. Today proved everything I needed to know about you. He turned to face the room again. And about who needs to be removed. He pulled out his phone and typed a short message. Moments later, another wave of Sapphire Holdings executives entered the restaurant. Legal officers, regional advisors, media consultants. It was no longer just an audit. It was a corporate cleansing. Victor stepped backward, bumping into a table. Please, he murmured. Let me explain. You had your chance, Richard said. Camille turned to him. You were never just a silent investor, were you? I was today, he said, smiling slightly. Until the silence needed breaking. He looked around the restaurant one last time. Let this be a reminder to every person in this room. Power doesn't always speak loudly, but when it does, it ends careers. And just like that, the man who had eaten alone in the corner became the voice that sealed their fate. Victor Malone stood cornered near the glass wine vault, his breath shallow, hands trembling behind his back. Camille faced him now, not just as a CEO, but as a force of reckoning. The room had quieted again. Auditors paused. Staff held their breath. Even Richard Quinn took a step back, giving Camille the floor. Victor, she said, voice low but razor sharp. You had full oversight of this location. Every incident, every complaint, every discrepancy in conduct. Victor nodded slowly. Camille, I didn't realize the full scope. Stop, she snapped. You realized enough to protect your bottom line. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Camille motioned to Elena. Show him. Elena tapped her tablet and turned it outward. A string of emails glowed across the screen. Dates, names, incident reports. At the top, a flagged message from Victor himself. Subject line, keep it discreet. Do not escalate. Elena read aloud. We're seeing uptick in tourist complaints about discriminatory tone. Advise staff to be cautious with phrasing. No need to formally log unless press involved. Important to protect repeat client revenue streams. Victor's face drained of blood. You buried complaints, Camille said coldly. You turned human dignity into a financial risk analysis. It wasn't like that, he whispered. You knew, she pressed. You didn't just ignore it, you enabled it. Every victim was just another liability to you. Around them, employees watched with wide eyes. Some had tears, others, shame. I was trying to avoid negative press, Victor said quietly. I thought I was protecting the brand. Camille took a single step forward. You weren't protecting the brand. You were corrupting it. Victor swallowed hard. Camille, please. No, she said, her tone final. You're done. She pulled a silver pen from her blazer and signed an executive directive on Elena's tablet. Effective immediately, Victor Malone is stripped of all regional authority, access revoked, files seized, termination without severance. Gasps rippled through the room. Victor staggered back. You don't have to destroy me. I'm not destroying you, Camille said. I'm cleansing what you infected. Elena handed Victor a printed notice. Security will escort you off the premises. Tom, the same guard who had once removed Camille, now stood frozen near the exit, unsure where his loyalties should lie. Victor's voice broke. You'll regret this. But Camille didn't flinch. She simply replied, No, Victor, you will. He was led out in silence, and as the door clicked shut behind him, a hush of satisfaction settled over the room. One thread of the spiderweb had been cut. The rest were about to follow. The exit door clicked shut behind Victor Malone, but the silence he left behind felt heavier than before. Camille turned slowly. Her eyes scanned the dining room, landscape of expensive suits, lowered gazes, and forced smiles frozen mid-bite. Then they settled on Derek Burns, who stood stiffly beside the bar, pale and sweating. She walked toward him, each step measured, deliberate. Derek straightened, as if posture alone could shield him from consequence. "Mr. Burns," Camille said, her voice steady. "Step forward." He did, reluctantly. "You embarrassed a guest. You refused service. You ordered physical removal, without cause, without inquiry, without hesitation. Do you deny any of that?" Derek looked around, as if seeking escape. "Ms. Johnson, I thought I was protecting the restaurant's image. We've had issues with loiterers." "Loiterers," Camille repeated. He hesitated. "People who don't fit the clientele." "Like me," she said. Derek swallowed. "I didn't know who you were." "That's the second time you've said that," she replied. "Do you believe respect is earned only through recognition?" "No, of course not," he said quickly. "Then why?" Camille asked, her tone sharpening. "Did you treat me like a threat? And others like royalty?" Derek's lips moved, but no answer came. From behind the host stand, Emily let out a quiet sob. Camille turned to her. "Ms. Hayes." Emily stepped forward, tears running down her cheeks. "I didn't mean it. I was just doing what I thought we were supposed to." "What you were trained to do?" Camille asked. Emily nodded. "We're told to screen aggressively, to read the room. I didn't mean harm." Camille looked at both of them. Then she spoke, not with anger, but something heavier. Disappointment. "You didn't see a customer," she said quietly. "You saw a stereotype." The words dropped like a stone in still water. The entire restaurant went still. Every diner, every staff member, every auditor, listening. "You didn't evaluate behavior," Camille continued. "You evaluated skin tone, clothing, posture, and you made a decision about who deserved dignity." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing softly. Derek looked down at his shoes. Camille turned to Elena. "Document termination for Derek Burns, effective immediately. Reason: violation of service ethics and discrimination." Elena nodded, already typing. "And Emily Hayes," Camille said, pausing. Emily looked up with wide, pleading eyes. "You will be suspended pending full review. You'll have an opportunity to speak with Ethics Council." Emily nodded tearfully. "Thank you." Camille didn't respond. She simply turned back toward the dining room. The mask had been ripped away, the real culture exposed, and no one in that room would forget the sound of Camille's voice when she named what they had tried so hard to hide. The dust of consequence still lingered in the air, but Camille Johnson stood at the center of it all, not as a destroyer, but as an architect. She stepped forward, her voice calm yet resolute. "This isn't just about what happened today. It's about what's been allowed to happen for far too long." The remaining staff gathered. Some stood rigid with fear, others humbled by reflection. Diners leaned in, watching something rare, real leadership emerging from real reckoning. "I'm announcing a complete restructuring of Sapphire Holdings' Customer Experience Division," Camille said. "Effective immediately." Murmurs rippled through the room. "This will include a new training and compliance branch dedicated solely to equity, respect, and restorative practice. Every employee, from dishwasher to executive, will undergo immersive anti-bias training." She paused, letting that settle before continuing. "But we're going further." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick portfolio stamped with a sleek new logo. Black Excellence Program. "This is Sapphire's new initiative," she explained. "A recruitment, mentorship, and promotion pipeline for Black professionals and other historically marginalized communities, designed to elevate not just inclusion, but power." Gasps echoed. Some eyes filled with tears. "We're done tolerating quiet bias and polished prejudice," Camille said. "We will not reward silence. We will reward courage, skill, and character." She turned slightly, eyes scanning until they landed on a woman near the back. Talia Monroe, still standing tall in her navy suit. "Talia," Camille said, her voice now carrying warmth. "Detective Monroe, I would like to formally offer you a new role, if you'll accept it." Talia blinked. "Ma'am?" A newly created position, Director of Independent Ethics Oversight for Sapphire Holdings, Camille announced. You've seen how this system works, from both sides. I want you on the inside, ensuring we never slide back. The entire room fell silent again. Talia stepped forward. I came here today to gather evidence, she said. What I found was truth, and the beginning of something better. She looked at Camille and nodded. I accept. A quiet, emotional applause spread among the staff. Cautious at first, then stronger. Diners joined in. Even Elena Cruz, still gripping her tablet, gave a nod of approval. Camille's voice softened as she concluded, We don't fix rot with paint. We fix it by rebuilding the foundation. Today is that start. It was no longer about punishment. It was about purpose. And in that moment, the sterile luxury of the sapphire table felt a little less cold. 2 weeks later, the sapphire table looked the same on the outside. Sleek windows, gold-accented signage, discreet valet service. But inside, it pulsed with something new. Camille Johnson stood at the center of the main dining room, dressed in deep emerald green. Her expression was serene, but beneath it was a quiet pride. Earned, not flaunted. The restaurant buzzed with invited guests. Those who had once been turned away, ignored, profiled. Tonight, they were not just welcomed. They were honored. Talia Monroe sat at a table near the window, sipping wine with a quiet smile. Former diners, like the French couple overcharged weeks ago, were seated nearby, laughing freely. Camille stepped up to the microphone placed gently near the bar. Tonight, she began, is not about image. It's about integrity. The room quieted. 2 weeks ago, this place was a symbol of silence, she said. But silence doesn't build legacy. Action does. She looked to Talia, then to the guests around her. Which is why every customer wronged by this institution will receive 1 year of complimentary dining across all Sapphire locations, not as an apology, but as acknowledgement. Soft gasps filled the room. Then applause. Gentle, then building. But the real gift, Camille continued, is the lesson we all take forward. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small engraved plaque. The gold letters gleamed beneath the lights. She read it aloud. Respect is not given by appearance. It is earned by action. A hush settled again. This, she said, holding up the plaque, will hang in every Sapphire location across the globe, not as branding, as a promise. Across the room, Emily Hayes, now reinstated under mentorship, watched with wet eyes. Tom stood in the back, arms folded, nodding slowly. Even the kitchen staff had paused, peeking through the service doors to listen. Richard Quinn stood quietly at the bar, a faint smile on his lips. He raised his glass toward Camille. She returned the gesture. Cameras flashed as a reporter from the New York Times leaned in to whisper to a colleague. This story isn't just viral, it's revolutionary. But Camille didn't do this for the headlines. She did it because some legacies aren't written in ink. They're written in choices. And as the music rose, as laughter filled the once tense air, and as justice made room for joy, Camille stepped down from the microphone and joined her guests, not as a CEO above them, but as a woman beside them. The story had ended, but the impact was just beginning.